She dragged my pregnant wife off a medical cot and told the paramedics they were trespassing. Yeah, that's how this whole thing started. I remember standing there with my hands shaking, not from fear but from that weird kind of anger where your brain goes quiet, and all you hear is your heartbeat in your ears. And this woman, our HOA president, looked at me like she was inspecting a parking permit, not like my wife was doubled over in pain. That's the moment I knew I was done being quiet. Now, let me back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand what life in that neighborhood was like. We'd moved into Maple Ridge Estates thinking it was going to be this dream community, safe, quiet, manicured lawns, all those brochures that brag about being eco-certified and storm-ready. My wife, Claire, she was 7 months pregnant at the time, and after we lost our first pregnancy, she did everything by the book. Every form, every doctor's note, every HOA permission slip. We weren't about to break rules. But Maple Ridge had a different definition of rules. There, compliance wasn't just a policy, it was practically a religion. At first, it was almost funny. We got a violation notice because 2 neighbor kids drew chalk hearts on our driveway while Claire was watering her basil. Unauthorized markings on communal adjacent property, it said. We laughed, cleaned it up, thought nothing of it. A week later, we got another one. Unauthorized congregation of minors. Translation: 2 toddlers playing with a toy kitchen on our porch. That's when we realized the HOA wasn't protecting peace. It was manufacturing control, and Claire, with her belly showing and her kindness on full display, became a target. The queen of all this nonsense was a woman named Judith Kramer. She had been running the HOA like it was her personal kingdom for years. Blazer always pressed, SUV spotless, smile as tight as a stapler. Judith thrived on paperwork the way normal people thrive on coffee. And she didn't just enforce rules, she curated enemies. Single moms, immigrants, elderly folks who couldn't keep up with the lawn standards. And apparently us. The real trouble started when Claire's OB sent a letter requesting that she have emergency access to the clubhouse, because it was the only building in the neighborhood reinforced for medical use. You'd think that's a no-brainer, right? Not to Judith. She denied the request, said it would set a dangerous precedent. I built models for military surveillance systems for a living, and I'm telling you, the fetal monitor Claire needed emitted less interference than a toaster. But Judith said no, and the board backed her, or at least they didn't have the guts to stop her. So when Claire collapsed one evening on our porch steps, all I could do was carry her to that damn clubhouse. The EMTs arrived minutes later, and right behind them came Judith. She didn't ask about Claire's vitals. She didn't ask if the baby was okay. She pulled out her phone and said, "This isn't a clinic, it's HOA property. You're trespassing." She ordered them to move my wife in the middle of her crisis. And Claire, God, she was barely conscious. She didn't fight it. That night our daughter came into the world 4 weeks early, underweight, and the room was so quiet it still echoes in my head. That should have been the end, right? File a complaint, move on. But Claire blamed herself for not speaking louder, for letting Judith have the final word. She didn't know I had been recording everything. Every meeting, every door code update, every smug little moment where Judith bent the rules for her own power. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a witness with a forensic toolkit. And I decided I wasn't letting her bury us under silence. The first real confrontation came at a compliance hearing. You know, one of those weekday morning meetings designed so working folks couldn't attend. Judith sat at the head of the table like she was presiding over a trial, and next to her was the compliance officer, a woman named Lydia Morales. Lydia kept flipping papers and tapping her pen, nervous, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. I laid out my case, cited the bylaws, pulled up timestamps, even projected a still frame of Claire on that cot with Judith in the doorway holding her phone like a shield. Judith smirked and said, "This image proves nothing." Lydia's pen slipped right across the page. That was the first crack. After that, Judith tried to come after me directly. She cornered me at the mailbox one morning, waved a folded violation notice in my face, and said, "You're building something, but you should think twice before dragging this community into a circus." I looked at her and said, "Peace isn't compliance, Judith, it's consent." She blinked, just once, and walked back to her SUV. And that was the last time I let her think she scared me. See, once you start talking to neighbors, you realize you're not alone. Jamal across the street had been fined 3 times because his shutters weren't the approved shade of blue. Tanya, 2 houses down, was written up for letting her niece stay overnight without prior approval. Everybody had a story. Judith wasn't just controlling the neighborhood, she was choking it. And then Lydia, the compliance officer, finally broke. We met in a coffee shop where nobody lingers too long. She slid me a flash drive and whispered, meeting recordings, draft violations, emails. She made me CC everything to myself, like she thought I'd be her archive. On that drive was proof that Judith had faked votes, rewritten minutes, even drafted a clause about removing pregnant women from the clubhouse if needed. She planned it. She knew. That's when I built my plan. 3 phases. First, I leaked one clean clip to a local journalist, Evelyn Tran, a reporter who doesn't chase car crashes, she chases systemic rot. Second, I compiled the medical negligence footage into a timeline that showed exactly what Judith's cruelty looked like when it wore a blazer and carried a clipboard. And third, I prepared an official package for the city's Department of Community Affairs, complete with chain of custody and medical affidavits. This wasn't going to be gossip. It was going to be evidence. When Evelyn's story hit the news, everything cracked open. The segment aired at 6:02, and by 6:08 my inbox was full. Neighbors started texting, emailing, even stopping by our porch saying, "She did the same thing to me." That night, the HOA called an emergency meeting with no notice, a clear sign they were panicking. I went, not to speak, just to watch. The hall buzzed with tension, and for once, nobody was afraid. Judith walked in at 7:29 sharp, blazer pressed, smile glued in place, but her eyes were scanning too fast. She said, "We understand there's been some confusion due to an irresponsible news piece," and a woman in the front row cut her off. "Was that your voice on the tape?" Another man shouted, "How many violations did you issue without a vote?" Hands went up all over the room. Jamal stood, Tanya stood, people I'd never even met stood. And for the first time, Judith had no one left willing to echo her voice. Lydia walked to the front, opened a binder, and said, clear as day, no motion was ever voted on to restrict emergency access. Any statement made to the contrary was verbal and not recorded in official minutes. The board members looked stunned. One admitted, "We never approved that violation." Another said, "She filed it without our signatures." And Judith, she just folded her hands so tightly her knuckles turned white, and she stayed silent. 3 days later, she resigned. A week after that, the board disbanded under city supervision. Every violation she'd ever issued was suspended, and the clubhouse, once her throne room, was renamed the Claire Ellis Community Commons. We didn't ask for that, but when the vote came up, it passed without a single objection. Now there's a bronze plaque by the entrance where Claire once lay denied help, and for the first time, the place feels like it belongs to the people who actually paid for it. I still walk the neighborhood sometimes, past the mailbox where Judith tried to intimidate me, past the porch where Claire collapsed, past the corner lot where Jamal's kid used to splash in a plastic pool before Judith banned unsanctioned structures. Everything looks the same, but it doesn't feel the same. Fear doesn't live long in the open. And once you shine a light, once neighbors start raising their hands together, the whole system of control crumbles. I didn't win because I yelled louder. I won because I kept the receipts. Because I listened, I documented, and when the moment came, I let Judith's own voice bury her. So here's what I'll ask you, what do you think? Was I right to take it public, or should I have just moved on quietly and protected my family's peace? Do HOAs protect communities, or do they just create petty tyrants with too much free time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your own stories, and let's talk about what justice looks like in neighborhoods like ours, because silence, I've learned, is exactly where people like Judith get their power. And I'm never giving them that again.